Get the thumbs up. Here we go. Async and non-blocking code reviews. But first, let's talk a little bit about scribes. The people that copied over the Torah for hundreds of years, the Torah, the Holy Scripture of the Jewish people, and they do that according to very specific rules. They take one of about 60 to 80 sheets of parchment, and in about a year, they copy a whole Torah. They do that by taking that sheet of parchment, taking the original, and then taking a feather quill, and start copying over the 304,805 characters by hand. They then give that specific sheet of parchment to another scribe. They take it and the original, and they start counting all the letters and the words and the sentences and the paragraphs, and then they compare the center letter and the center word and the center sentence and the center paragraph. And when there are more than 3 errors, that sheet of parchment will not become part of a new Torah. That is a little less than a week of work. And imagine, like, there's no backspace on a feather quill. There is no scribbling it out and going, actually, I meant this. Less than a week of work gets trashed. But it doesn't just get trashed because there are holy words on this sheet of parchment. So what you do is you put it in a clay jar. That clay jar goes into a cave, and you seal that cave. And that's where we found the Dead Sea Scrolls. So basically, our scripture is based on erroneous documents of like hundreds of years old. I mean, we go through some hardship when it comes to code review, right? But this is like next level. I'm from Koornstra. I work at Usabilla in this amazing team. There's a few of them up here, and I think in the room as well. We create voice of customer solutions so that our customers know what their customers think of them. We gather that feedback through multiple channels, like applications, through the web, and also through email. And we use code reviews for a lot of things. And that sort of inspired me to give this talk, to sort of have a little bit more insight into that. All right, show of hands. Who here uses code reviews to merge code into their main branch more than a third of the time? More than 2/3? Almost always? Ooh, all right, interesting. It's about a quarter, I think. Yeah. All right, I want to talk to you about code reviews because for a few things. First of all, I want to talk about the rewards and efforts, and that must be pretty good, right? Because otherwise we wouldn't do it. But effort-wise, sometimes it takes a little bit too much. So let's also talk about how we can minimize that effort. And finally, how we can apply that in a consistent and consequent manner throughout our development flow. But first, rewards and efforts. Like I said, this balance is good, right? Because we wouldn't do it otherwise. And you hear a lot about the reward side. Things like quality. It improves quality. Maintainability, reusability, readability, less defects, like basically all the abilities that you can think of, it would improve. And also communication. Be that inside teams, be that between teams, be that about the domain. These kind of concepts do we use? This is how they interact. Or about tech, right? This is the kind of storage we use. This is the kind of patterns we want to see in the code. This is the stuff we don't want to see in the code. And if you look at it like that, quality, communications, it's like this perfect picture. Just like this perfect picture of the pyramids of Giza. I mean, look at these people here in the front. They probably traveled through the desert for days, and now, almost without water, they finally reached the pyramids of Giza. Perfect picture. But what I want to do is show you the other side. I want to swivel that camera slightly to show you the complete picture, to show you everything so that you can make a good decision based on all the facts, basically. All right, rewards, but efforts. How about that? First of all, everyone that starts out with code reviews or has ever done code reviews know that it takes a lot of time. But just how much time? That is more a gut feeling to everyone, right? So what I did is, we have this GitHub API, and I went into it, and for a few of our projects at Usabilla, I looked at how long does it actually take to close that PR? How long on median does it take to close a PR? So there's two things to keep in mind. This is statistically not significant. It is our organizations, it's a few projects, it's maybe a few hundred PRs, but that is about it. And second, correlation is not causation. If one thing goes up and the other goes up as well, it might be that one causes the other causes the one, or that there's a third factor involved that causes both of them to go up. Correlation is not causation, statistically not significant. But this is what you see. The median time to fix a PR in hours versus the root comments in that PR. And a root comment to me is a comment that starts off a discussion. Every subsequent reply to that is not counted as a root comment. And what you see is that once you get to that 20 to 30 or 30 to 40 amount of root comments, it can take you 400 up to 700 hours on median to close that PR. Yes, this might be specific to our organization, this might be specific to the project, and yes, bad code gets more comments and takes longer to fix. But still, right? If you then divide this number by the amount of root comments, you get the median time to fix that root comment. And also here you see less of an upward trend, but still it's reasonable to think that it takes about 10 hours on median to fix one of those root comments. The only thing I want to say here is that comments take time. And we know this, but sometimes we don't treat it as such. Oh, this isn't aligned nicely. There's an extra white line here. Like, that doesn't cost you 10 hours to fix, but we should be sort of mindful about this. All right, but at least the quality goes up, you say. Yes, if you keep your PRs small. This is some nice research from Atlassian. They looked, for example, at the number of files in a PR and then also the time that it takes to look at that one of those files. And you see that if you get to like 30 to 40 files, it only takes about 2 minutes to go through a file. There's a lot of lines scanned per minute. By the way, what you see over here is the law of triviality, or bike shedding as we call it. Or as Cardinal Richelieu said it, give me 10 lines of the most honest man alive, and I will find something in it to hang him. It is not that dramatic for us, but we have all been in that PR where it was 6 lines and still someone had to like something trivial to say about it, right? All right, you know what we're going to do? We're going to add more reviewers, because more reviewers look at different things, look at different files. It's going to be way better, except that it's not. If you add more reviewers to your PR, to your code review, actually the time per reviewer goes down, and even worse, the total amount of defects goes down as well. This is not the amount of defects found per reviewer. This is the total amount found. What you see here is the bystander effect, which says when there's an accident, an issue, the more bystanders you have, the less chance you have of actually getting help. Someone else will do this. It is a shared responsibility, right? All right, times one factor. Cognitive load is another. At Usabilla, we use rebasing. So let's say you have three commits. One is the interface, and subsequent 2 are the implementations. Someone doesn't like the naming of that interface, of a method, or whatever. Now you have to go back, fix it there, not the issue. But then, the 2 implementations you have to fix without introducing actually new styling issues, new unit test issues, new static analysis issues, integration test issues. Lots of things that we want to think about, right? So I think we can agree that there's quite a lot of cognitive load going on there. Cognitive load, time, hits on morale if things, bless you, aren't fixed nicely, aren't worded nicely in our code review. These are all opportunity costs. Costs incurred because we can only spend that scarce resource once. And now I looked into this, I felt a little sad. I felt a little like, wow, this maybe balance isn't so good. So I thought of a few things to make that effort size, to make that effort sort of diminish, a little less. And hopefully we can make that balance way better by applying some tricks that we applied, well, not we as PHP, but let's say the dev community has applied to code, namely async and non-blocking. Let's start off with async. Async, good, took you longer. Async to me is the fact that You can have an issue in a PR, but maybe it's not necessarily fixed, like you don't need to fix it there. Maybe you can launch that in a separate context, close that PR, close that code review, and maybe if it falls through in the other context, you need to fix it, then come back to the code, right? Get stuff out of that code review context, really. But what kind of issues are we looking at? Well, we're a pretty precise bunch. We have a lot of stuff that we're looking at, and that's perfectly fine, but we need to look at it in a slightly structured manner to make this, to make us think about it. I would propose doing reward versus conflict. Gives us 4 nice little quadrants that we can squibble about. And I think we can agree on one thing. We want the human beings to look at the highly rewarding stuff, because the low rewarding stuff just isn't worth it. And the nice coincidental thing is that low rewarding stuff is pretty easily tooled away. Gabriel gave some nice things about coding standards in the other room before here. And things like coding style issues, you can just fix with PHP-CS. Let that just run. Don't let the humans look at that. Static analysis tools like PHP-stan can save you from unused imports or those kind of things, right? And the nice thing about the low conflictual stuff is that it is actually pretty factual. Like there's not a lot of discussion about a forgotten for dump or a bug. Functionality fails, maybe a little bit, but if you use bhat, you have defined your functionality exactly in scenarios, and there's not a lot of discussion there. Low quality tests, a little bit harder, but infection lets you create mutation tests where the original codes get mutated, and they see if the test actually catches that mutation. But what we're left with is a highly rewarding, highly conflictual, and highly subjective quadrant. So let's see what we can do there. Well, first of all, offloading, right? Get that stuff out of the code review, because the code review is, by definition, a pretty low bandwidth environment. You need to put everything into text, and there can be a lot of confusion there. So offloading stuff like setting standards into a chapter meeting, into a development meeting, a team meeting, I don't care. Wherever you talk face-to-face is way better, because that is a higher bandwidth environment. And that is the technology, but also things like communications can be offloaded. Things like opening a PR and you have a new team member. That new team member doesn't know a lot about your domain and all that kind of stuff. So how about sitting next to them and then helping them out with going through that code review, giving that context, creating that high bandwidth environment. See if you can offload some of that stuff out of the code review. Do you really need to do it there? That the tooling that I talked about before, make sure you can run that locally. Because if you need to run it on the build server every time, everyone is already looking at your styling issues and all that kind of stuff. If you can run that locally and in the Git hook, then you can prevent that stuff from happening on the PR. At usability, we use makefiles to make sure that everyone runs the code or the tooling exactly in the same way, right? Same configuration options, everything. And we use Docker, obviously, to make sure that we run it exactly the same as on the build server. Another great technology or technique is pairing. Pairing is a great way of getting idiosyncrasies that you, especially you, we all have, right? And pairing is great for getting that code review before the code review. And finally, communicating up front. It seems really obvious, but discovering on your code review that for key value you don't use Couchbase, but you use Redis, that is the wrong time to discover this kind of stuff. And also stuff about design. Right? You implemented a specific design pattern, but maybe that wasn't the best choice. Creating a UML and like fixing that stuff there takes you what, 1 minute, 2 minutes? But it saves you a ton of effort later on in your code review. All right, these are a few of the async tricks, but let's move on to non-blocking as well. Non-blocking to me is the fact that you can't move on with this because someone said, like, I need you to fix this, right? I want you to fix this because otherwise I will not approve. But if you do get that blocking comment, because I think it's a utopia to think that there's never going to be that, just the least amount of chance. If you do get that, I'd like to propose following what Jeff Bezos did in the management of Amazon. He said, disagree and commit is really powerful. At some point, you're just seeing into the future, right? You're going, this part of the code needs to be more flexible. No, this part of the code needs to be more flexible. That can be completely rigid. You just don't know. So you need to ask yourself two questions. The first is, can we fix this later? Like, is there a moment, is this something with a really big impact? And second is, exactly that. Sorry, can we fix this later? And how much time does it actually cost to revisit this, right? Like, is this a really big impact? And is it really harmful to get it later done? All right, so that is when you get that blocking comment. Finding the right reviewers is key. We saw before that the reviewers, actually more reviewers contribute to actually having that having bigger problems in your review. One way of doing that is tagging tagging specialists. So let's say you have a database query, right? You don't exactly know how this query was. Like, you looked at it, it looked pretty efficient, but you actually have no idea if that is the case. How about opening that PR and then tagging that database specialist in there, going, hey, database specialist, can you take a look at this? There's two things happening then. That database specialist has a really efficient way of going through your PRs. And the second thing is that that bystander effect is no longer happening, right? There's more developers who are unsure about that query, but you're tagging them out. You're going, look, there's already someone looking at this, it's fine. And the second way of finding that right reviewer is git guild. You go into the repo and you give it 2 commits, and it tells you these are the people that added or subtracted the most lines. These are the people that can tell you the most about your code. So Ani, Rodrigo, Renato, those would be really good candidates for this PR. All right, and then we come to the commenting phase, right? Communicating intent there is really important, because what GitHub does for us is it tells you, okay, now tell me about this whole blob of comments. What do you think? Request changes, approve, or comment? It gives a very big signal for maybe where we want a little bit more refinement. So communicating intent with that first character that says, look, this is a blocking comment to me. I need you to fix this. Or actually, I don't care about this too much. This is more a suggestion. Or we'll solve this asynchronously. You might have to give a presentation about this component later. You might have to talk to me one-on-one because I don't have all the context. But we can solve this asynchronously. All right. So those async and non-blocking tricks, those are just tricks. You can think of a bunch more, and you don't have to use all of these, obviously. But what we want is we want to have a consistent way of applying this, right? We want to have a code review etiquette. And etiquette is nothing more than behaving yourself just a little bit better in a specific context. But that context is highly important. So let me run you through a few of them. So first of all, the team. Is this inside or outside your team? Some people really like it when other teams tweeze apart their PR. They are looking for perfection, the ultimate truth. Pristine code is only the best, right? But me personally, if I look at other teams' code, I tend to sort of take a step back. I look at architectural issues. Hey, are we now doing event sourcing here all of a sudden? Is that a good idea? What kind of storages do we use? Libraries? What kind of patterns do I want to see and don't I want to see? Another one is blast radius. Microservices are all the rage, and by design, they have a pretty small blast radius, which is great. Like, having a new, I don't know, coding standard, a new styling rule that you want to try out. In a microservice, that's not a problem. But good luck trying this on a monolith, right? Where like there's hundreds of people working on the same code. That is not going to fly. And finally, robustness. So if you're working on that next financial system, right? The bank, the whatever, credit card data. Yes, by all means, go all out. Like, you need to nail down every inch of that application. But if you're working on a development tool that spits out some numbers every 3 weeks, and if that doesn't happen this week, it can happen the next week, it's fine. that needs to look very different in code review to me. All right, so you have these contexts in mind, and you have these async and non-blocking tricks. What you're going to do then is you're going to sit in that room with your team, with your chapter, with your, I don't know, whole department for my end. Every week, month, 3 months, make a habit out of it. Start looking at your code reviews and start doing code review reviews. Take something with a lot of comments, not a lot of comments. Close very quickly, didn't close very quickly. Had a lot of conflict, very low in conflict. And then start talking about what you could have done better. What kind of tricks could we have applied? What context are we in? And how should we have done this in a different way? What you're dabbling around with is the complex quadrant of the Kinefin framework. The Kinefin framework is a sort of sense-making device. It makes sense of behavior, of you and me in specific contexts. And what we're doing here is complex. We have retrospective causality. Maria didn't have her morning coffee. Marco then said something very nasty in this PR, and then things exploded, right? Retrospectively, we can take a look at that, but at that moment, Marco probably didn't know that Maria didn't have her morning coffee, right? We have an emergent practice. We want to probe by looking at those code reviews, sense by discussing amongst ourselves in that room, like, what do we think? How could we have done better? What kind of tricks could we have applied here to make this go smoother? And then responding by walking out of that room with a new common understanding of this is how we do code reviews. This is how we want to respond in this situation. This is the kind of style we want to have with all of us. Last words before the happy hour. Don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. Don't stop doing code reviews. Don't stop commenting because it takes time. Yes, that's okay. But do start being mindful about the opportunity cost that we create in terms of time, in terms of effort, in terms of hits on morale if things aren't worded nicely. Think about the async and non-blocking tricks. Think of a bunch more. Drop a few. And start going into that room and discussing amongst yourself, how can we do this better? I think this is the only way for us to achieve truly async and non-blocking code reviews. Thanks very much.